The new film, The Batman, slaps both a definite article and a seriously emo haircut on the Caped Crusader. This time, it's Robert Pattinson who broods and butt kicks to clean up the streets of Gotham. He's facing off against Paul Dano's Riddler, who in this incarnation is a sadistic serial killer, leaving clues that point to a dark secret lurking in Gotham's seamy underbelly. A secret that somehow involves a gangster played by John Turturro and, under a lot of padding and a lot of prosthetics, Colin Farrell's Penguin. But fear not, Bat fans. Bruce gets help from not yet Commissioner Gordon, played by Jeffrey Wright, as well as Zoe Kravitz's Catwoman. I'm Glenn Weldon, and today we're talking about The Batman on Pop Culture Happy Hour from NPR. Here with me is the host of NPR's Book of the Day podcast and a reporter for the Culture Desk, Andrew Limbong. Hey, Andrew.
Yo, what's up?
Welcome back. Also with us is Daisy Rosario. She's an executive producer at Stitcher, where she works with shows like The Sporkful. Hey, Daisy.
Hey, Glenn.
Hey. So let's get to it. As The Batman opens, Bruce Wayne's been clomping around Gotham in a bulletproof batsuit for 2 years, trying to clean up the streets. He's befriended Jim Gordon and knocked plenty of heads together, but he's stymied when some of the city's most prominent citizens start getting murdered. The killer leaves notes addressed to Batman, riddles that draw him into a mystery that just might point back to his own family. There are plenty of action set pieces, elaborate fight scenes, and car chases involving a new muscle car Batmobile, which is pretty cool. But director Matt Reeves and his co-writer Peter Craig are leaning into the world's greatest detective facet of the Batman character. This is really the first Batman film to function chiefly as a mystery story, complete with red herrings that complicate, and some might say overcomplicate, the nearly 3-hour-long plot. This movie's in theaters now. Andrew, hit me. What'd you think?
Okay. So going into it, before all the press came out, I was kind of hyped for it, right? Because, big Robert Pattinson fan. And then, that 2:55 time came out. I was like, no.
Yeah.
But I was pleasantly surprised. The sort of action keeps it moving. It's a little too complicated and you can probably trim maybe 15, 20 minutes out. But I gotta say, I loved Robert Pattinson's Batman more than I thought I would.
Why?
I think it's because, and I don't know if it's because of the sort of red aesthetics of the entire movie, but he kind of reminds me of Terry McGinnis.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if you ever watched Batman Beyond.
The animated series Batman Beyond, yeah.
Yeah. I think Robert Pattinson codes a little younger than Michael Keaton or Christian Bale or, Ben Affleck does. And a lot of that is physical, right? He's less jacked. He's kind of skinny in a fun, cool way. It's clear that he's not 100% willing to be Batman. He's sort of doing it begrudgingly, right? And I think that adds an interesting texture. I think Bale and Keaton and them, they're comfortable being lonely. They're sort of built to be stoic and still. Whereas Pattinson, it's sort of self-imposed. But I think he doesn't want to be lonely, but he knows he should and has to be. And I just think that was an interesting take on the character.
Yeah, interesting. I agree with you there. Daisy, what do you think?
I liked it. I liked it a lot, but that runtime, it is just so long. It is, before I even went into the movie, I was like, how is this movie going to be 15 minutes longer than Amadeus and 7 minutes shorter than Endgame? That was how my brain was processing this length of time.
Yeah.
It's a lot to ask an audience, and you have to be earning all of those minutes. And I think I really do like that they leaned into the Batman as the world's greatest detective. That is an aspect of Batman I've always enjoyed. It really, had the feel, and the thing I've always enjoyed about being able to pick up kind of a random Batman graphic novel, something like Arkham Asylum or The Long Halloween. It's just fun, and to see that version, if you've known that version exists and that we haven't really gotten it in a movie before. I don't love Robert Pattinson's Batman as much as Andrew does, but I did respect that it all felt like actual choices. It didn't feel accidental. I was I don't know that I love these choices, but I feel like you're making interesting choices at least. There are so many moments that you could trim down to make it kind of probably a 2.5, or I'd give it 2.20.
Yeah. It does feel... It never drags per se, but there certainly feels a couple unhurried moments when you're thinking, I am watching the extended cut of this movie.
Right.
I am not watching the theatrical cut. I am at home on a couch.
Yeah.
And that's fine, I guess. We should say, prepare yourself for that. The other thing we should tell people, just as a bit of service journalism, is, do you see the Waynes die? You do not.
You don't.
No pearls. No
was
popcorn. It's so refreshing. It's referred to, of course, because they're not going to not do that. But if you're going and thinking, are we going to see it again? We are not. I went into this thinking, I can't figure out why Pattinson would want to do this. I've grown to really like him as an actor.
Yeah.
I find the choices he makes, as you mentioned, Daisy, very fascinating, both in a given scene, but also his projects. But he really started off brooding in a film franchise that kind of swallowed him up and really hemmed him in. He finally broke out of that. He did things like Robert Edgar's The Lighthouse, which I have watched just an unsettling amount of times because I love him in that. And here he's back, and he's brooding again. And he is subsuming himself in the demands of a franchise in which the character he's playing isn't so much a role as it is kind of an institution. And so what can he do? He can only kind of fill in bits around the edges. He can't make it his own. And for God's sake, he can only emote with his mouth. I mean, that's the role and that bulky-ass suit.
Oh, he's got those beautiful eyes, though.
Well, this is the thing I want to get to, right? Because why would you take on a role with so much pre-existing baggage? And then I thought, okay, well, Hamlet, right?
Sure.
To be fair, humanities professors, don't at me. I'm not comparing Hamlet to Batman. I'm saying, for an actor, how can I distinguish myself? What can I bring to it? So where does he fit? I mean, he is the 10th person to slap on the bat suit in the movies. And of course, I am counting Lewis Wilson and Robert Lowry, who wore the suit in the Batman movie serials of the 1940s.
Nice.
But as you mentioned, Andrew, he's not the youngest, he's not the oldest, he's not the most jacked, he's not the doughiest. What does he bring? Let's tick it off. 1, a jawline that you could slice manchego cheese with. I have said this many times. I know that sounds superficial and lookish, but look, if you're dealing with superheroes, you are dealing with visual iconography, right? Looks matter. And they have completely changed the suit, completely changed the cowl to highlight how clear and how sharp that jawline is. There are moments when it's just his big old melon filling the screen in the cowl. And I was just like, that looks drawn.
Yeah.
That does not look like a person. That looks like an illustration. I think he brings a lighter touch, right? Bale was all swear to me from the jump, like out of the gate.
Yes.
Pattinson spends most of this film bringing you ASMR Batman, right?
Oh, yeah.
Keaton whispered too. And I think what you're getting here is an arc from Keaton to Bale. And he also brings, this goes back to the eyes, a real haunted quality. There is a scene toward the end of this film where he is in conversation with another person. And to that other person, he has to remain impassive. But he has to show us, the audience, how much he's freaking out.
Yeah.
And that's where the eyes come in. I mean, this guy, I really think he nails the role in a way that I'm very happy for, but I was kind of surprised to see.
Yeah. I mean, I found myself, I would say, going in with similar thoughts to what you've expressed, Glenn, of kind of like, this seems maybe opposite of what my understanding of what you want in your career is, Robert Pattinson. What are we doing here? And then I kept thinking, like, with the exception of Val Kilmer, because he had those very specific lips, I'm like, how is everybody not figuring out who this is? Like, in that sense, like, I was distracted by it a little bit, especially, he's got like a chin dimple. And I was like, you telling me that you're not going to recognize this good looking face? But I also did like the kind of conflict that he brings to it. I feel like his relationship to being Batman and the goal for it and everything just felt so much more realistic. And he felt so unsure in a way that felt right to me. I really enjoyed that overall. And his age, part of me wonders if it's like, am I just going to always kind of see him as sort of young? Like, is he really reading younger than these people? Or do I just mentally go like the 1989 Batman, like those were adults to me, so they will always look older to me?
Of course.
But this is one where the fact that he is this wealthy, son of Gotham is a huge part of the movie in general, but it's not as much specific to what we learn about him as Batman. This movie is less specific of going, here are all the crazy tools he has. Like, you see him use things, but they're not giving you the, like, look at what we got, which we got a lot of in the Nolan movies.
Sure.
And so in that sense, it does feel more grounded. I also just really like the way that Gotham is a bigger character in this movie. It feels more real. And having just revisited the Nolan Batman movies, they're constantly saying Gotham. They're telling us, but they're not showing us in those movies, like Gotham, 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 Gotham. This one, Gotham feels like a really real place. And I really enjoyed that aspect of it as well.
There's plenty of Gothic touches in the architecture and the production design, but it's not super stylized the way it was in Burton or Schumacher.
Yes.
It is closer to the Gotham City, the comics. What do you guys think of the villains here? We got Paul Dano's Riddler. We're dealing with Colin Farrell's Penguin and Zoe Kravitz's Catwoman.
The Riddler for me has the highest highs and lowest lows.
Okay.
So I thought, like, without any spoilers, I think the Riddler's like overarching plan was like super effective and like actually kind of scary in a sort of timely way that like I didn't expect. That being said, his clues, like all the detective work leading up to that part, the worst part of the movie, the riddles, these riddles were not even that hard to understand. I was like, oh, obvious. Like I've had Wordles that were harder than some of these things. Like I don't, and it reminded me, like in a bad way, kind of Jim Carrey's Riddler. The answers were just as stupid. But Schumacher is like sort of like self-winking and sort of is like self-aware of how stupid it is, right? Like what's blind but can see or whatever. It's like, it's a bat, duh. You know what I mean?
I really liked Paul Dano. I thought he was pretty fun and a very creepy role otherwise. Obviously a ton of great actors in this movie, but there are things that felt like, hey, if you guys spent less time worrying about setting up the next movie, this movie could be 20 minutes shorter.
That's true.
God, I hated that, yeah.
Zoe Kravitz is, equally beautiful to look at. It is very difficult at times to see those two faces that big. You're like, this is overwhelming. And I can't feel this bad about myself today. But yeah, like whether I'm thinking about the performances or the mystery or the script, it's like, if you just got rid of some of that filler, I think everything about this would sing. And I say that having actually really still liked it a lot.
Yeah, the bit about Catwoman, you actually believe that Catwoman and Batman might have sex. Like that's an option that's on the table that usually like isn't there in any sort of superhero movie. Like they have kind of a horny energy that is equal and matching. I mean, like if you think about the Michelle Pfeiffer Catwoman, I feel like the horniness was like one-sided. She was doing all the heavy lifting, right, on that. Like she, like it worked because of Michelle Pfeiffer. Here, it's more equal opportunity, and they're both like into each other with their eyes and stuff. It's really cool. It was really cool to watch.
I am not sure that these three villains are in the same film, and that might just be a me thing, because in my head, each villain speaks to a different aspect of the Batman character, locates him in a different genre when you're telling one of their stories. So Joker, psychological thriller. Catwoman, noir. Penguin, gangster movie. Scarecrow, horror. Riddler, mystery. So to me, there is a kind of Jokerification of the Riddler going on here.
Right.
But I think that's probably a me thing. I'm over here worrying about my peas not touching my mashed potatoes on the plate, and that's me. But one of the reasons Riddler has always been my favorite Batman villain is because, like most Batman villains, he is not a physical threat. He's an intellectual one. He looks great in green and purple tights or the Matthew Lesko suit. Whatever you put him in, he looks great. So you got Dano over here doing a 7 movie thing. You got Farrell over here just doing De Niro as Al Capone. And then you've got Zoe Kravitz's Catwoman, who, I mean, she's great. She just kind of cut up a beanie. And that's her mask. I worry that there's a disconnect here. Did you guys feel a unity?
The one that I felt like stuck out was John Turturro.
Yeah, as the gangster Falcone.
As the gangster, it's like, oh, are we watching The Irishman?
Yeah. Yep. I'm starting to feel like we're in the latter days of Batman where we're content to rearrange all these pre-existing elements from decades of Bat lore instead of creating new ones. But I do feel like those previous Batman films cast a long shadow that this one never quite gets out from under. So what matters is the way you fit all these pre-existing pieces together. The risk is if you're mixing the same ingredients every time, you're going to get something that tastes exactly the same every time.
Yeah.
You could argue that the proportions matter a lot. The stuff you garnish with matters a lot. But this feels the closest to me to the Batman comics that are on the shelves now. Right. Previous Batman films always felt like they were their own thing. Like Burton is Burton, Schumacher, Nolan does Nolan, Snyder does Snyder. This hews in tone and in content and in look and feel like some of my favorite Batman comics of all time, like Long Halloween, you mentioned, Daisy, and Batman Year One. There's a lot of borrowing from Batman Year One in here. How does it land on anyone who doesn't know those comics? I'll be very interested to see.
I don't know if I'm being like a Robert Pattinson. I think he puts in the work to get out of the shadow. Like his iteration of Batman, like what that says about male aggression and like masculinity, his version of it, the fact that he's not jacked, the fact that he doesn't have a deep voice, right? Maybe I'm just projecting onto this completely, right? But there's a sort of a violent image of like 2002 sort of like soft boy, but is actually kind of mean, like angry guy energy. You can call it like emo, you can call it incel, but whatever it is, he's like tapping into some of those frustrations that can't be solved by punching, right? And I think what's also great about this movie is that like he's not very good at punching. Like, he gets hit a lot. He's like, he's like 2 years in.
Mhm.
This is a very adolescent Batman, and I think that's the defining marker of it.
Interesting. All right, so tell us what you think about The Batman. Find us on the Facebook at facebook.com/PCHH or tweet us at PCHH. Up next, What's Making Us Happy This Week.
The news moves fast. Listen to the NPR News Now podcast to keep up. We update stories as they evolve every hour. So no matter when you listen, you get the news as close to live as possible on your schedule. Subscribe to or follow the NPR News Now podcast.
Now it is time for our favorite segment of This Week and Every Week. What's making us happy this week? Andrew, what's making you happy this week, sir?
There's a new album coming out on March 11th from this band called Drug Church called Hygiene. And it's indebted to the 90s, sort of, but without being retready, right? The riffs are riffy, the grooves are groovy, and it's like so chunky. All of the songs on this record seem to be about being like mad and frustrated that the world is the way it is and you can't do anything about it. In a sort of like funny way. I think we've got a song queued up from A Million Miles of Fun. It's a sort of like dude philosophy that's kind of dumb but kind of funny and like very energy giving to me. It's a record I turn to when like the world is bad and sad, so you might as well lift weights.
Energy giving. I love that.
The band is called Drug Church and the album is called Hygiene.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Andrew. Daisy, what is making you happy this week?
I'm finally knitting. I have been trying to teach myself to knit for a very long time. It is something I always try to do in the winter and that I especially try to do during the Winter Olympics. I did finally find like a kit and some videos that made sense to me. There's a lot of stuff online. So there's this website, a company called weareknitters.com, and they sell these learn to knit kits, and the videos themselves were just some of the clearest to follow. And so while my knitting is not great, there is fabric that has been knitted together and it looks like a shape.
Okay.
And it is the most I have ever done. And it's really exciting. And so I just think that's really fun. And so, yeah, if you are like me, someone who wants to be a little bit more crafty and kind of doesn't know where to start, I really found their stuff accessible. So that was weareknitters.com.
Weareknitters.com. Thank you, Daisy. What is making me happy this week? Self-Center is a narrative fiction comedy podcast from Audible. It stars Judy Greer. And I'm just going to end it right there because that's all you really should need to know. I'll give you a little bit more. It's about a woman who goes to a wellness retreat that may harbor some sinister intent. And look, I get it. It's self-help. It's wellness community. It's cleanses, spas, spin classes. All that stuff is really easy to make fun of. It's low-hanging fruit. It gets the obvious jokes out of the way up front and then just keeps getting more specific, weirder, funnier as it starts to let the jokes delineate the characters instead of just take potshots. It's Kim Cattrall, it's Aparna Nancherla, it's Joel Kim Booster, it's Jane Lynch, and not to put too fine a point on it, Judy Greer. So it's very funny. It's very well performed. That is Self-Center on Audible. And that is what's making me happy this week. And that brings us to the end of our show. You can find all of us on Twitter. You can find me at GH Weldon. You can find Daisy at RunDMR. And you can find Andrew at Andrew Limbong. You can follow editor Jessica Reedy at Jessica_Reedy. Producer Candice Lim at the Candice Lim. How fitting. You can follow Ramel Wood at Blurgosphere and Mike Katzif at Mike Katzif. That's Katzif. Mike's band Hello Come In provides the music you might be bobbing your head to right now. I don't know your life. Live your life. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure to join the PCHH.
Thanks for listening to Pop Culture Happy Hour from NPR, and we will see you all next week.
Russian forces have officially invaded Ukraine, and now the U.S. is issuing new sanctions on the Kremlin.
Putin chose this war, and now he and his country will bear the consequences.
The NPR Politics Podcast breaks down what all this means. Get the latest from the NPR Politics Podcast every weekday.
Hey friends, Linda Holmes here. I'd love it if you subscribed to Pop Culture Happy Hour Plus. You'll get a sponsor-free listen, and this is key, you'll be supporting our show. Subscribe now at plus.npr.org/happyhour.